One day, earlier this year, I'm in the middle of doing my thing, whichever one of those things, when I wanted a cup of tea. As I waited for it to boil, I took out my phone. This is one of the times when I'll occasionally launch Twitter. I don't really spend much time on that platform like I used to. And yes, I'm still calling it Twitter. With a few minutes to spare, it's a convenient distraction.
Search and Explore tab. Selected. Home tab.
Swipe.
New items.
Swipe through the nonsense, and then I came across a tweet.
At just 12, Eleanor edited Liv delivered the audio description for hashtag The Witches National Theatre to almost 86 children, whilst reading over 400 lines in Braille. Kudos to Ilse Bates, who queued along with the NT spearheaded the initiative. Hashtag Eleanor's Voice Theatre masks representing the performance arts. Pic.x.com.
A young blind person narrating AD? That's a story for flipping the script on audio description, right here on this podcast. I'm Thomas Reed, your host and producer. This is Read My Mind Radio. It's tea time! Read my mind. Read my mind. Radio. Act 1. Why not? After reading the tweet about Eleanor, the 12-year-old blind describer, I immediately reached out to the author of the tweet, Roz Chalmer.
I'm come from the UK. My pronouns are she, her. I'm in my 60s. I've got silver hair and I'm wearing pink glasses. And I'm sitting in front of a microphone in a very tiny little booth at the moment.
Roz is an audio description professional.
I started 25 years ago at the National Theatre in London. And since then, I've sort of broadened my field to do things like circus and ballet and contemporary dance and opera. And I'm now really concentrating on working with small organisations where it seems that people don't get the opportunity to hear about the new writing and the new performances. My main focus is theatre. I do film and TV, but it tends to be for independents rather than for the big guys.
And you write as well as narrate, correct?
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about how you met Eleanor.
I work in a theatre called the Old Vic, which is, I think, about the oldest theatre in London. It's over 200 years old. The Old Vic does a Christmas show. It's Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol, and there is a character in it called Tiny Tim, who is disabled in the story and in actual life. And they use 3 or 4 disabled children to play Tiny Tim. And Eleanor is one of those and has been, I think she did 3 years running. I met her at Touch Tours. She is also a very ardent audio description consumer, so she comes to a lot of shows that I've described. I got to know her through that.
Hi, I'm Eleanor Stollery. My pronouns are she, her, and I am 13 years old.
They grow so quickly. When I read the tweet, she was only 12. First, a little background on Eleanor's history with AD from a consumer point of view.
So when I listen to TV, there's audio description on all the time. Mummy and Daddy try and take me to as many theatre shows as we can that are available and that we can afford. It's a vital thing for me. If there's something that's not audio described on TV, we will change it over. It's sort of part of our lives now.
Do you by any chance remember your first experience with audio description?
Oh gosh, I think my first experience was a Disney film. I lost my sight when I was about 3 or 4, so it was probably a year into my sight loss. It was a big change, but it's a normal thing for me now. I talk to my friends about it and they say, oh, don't you find it annoying? And I'm like, no, because it helps me so much.
You remember when you were 3? You're closer to 3 than I am, but yeah. Eleanor wasn't only interested in taking in film and theater. By 8 years old, she was performing in school plays and local drama clubs.
I've always loved singing and acting and mimicking people's voices and that kind of thing. But there was an open audition for A Christmas Carol, and I'd recently finished a regime of chemotherapy, and we'd had quite a tough time, and my mummy and daddy were like, why don't we just do it?
Tim, Dad, was that you who was like, hey, let's just go try it?
Yeah, pretty much. Obviously, I can't do anything without the approval of the other half, Kelly, but we wanted to do something just as a distraction from all that our daughter was going through and you know, having to put up with. I think we knew that Eleanor liked performing. She would take direction very well. So perhaps it stemmed from that we thought that she'd enjoy the experience. So we thought, why not? Let's go and see how an audition for a West End show plays out. To our complete amazement, she ended up getting the part, and at such a prestigious theatre.
And I got a second audition. It was an amazing experience, like we'd imagined it to be. And I got the part, which was amazing. And I've done that for 3 years consecutively. And then after my first year, I got an agent and she put me forward for some roles. And then I got a voice part in a cartoon called Milo, which is on Channel 5 in the UK. Milo! That kind of got me into the voiceover part of acting.
Then we saw how Lofty and Farmer Tilly worked as a team, so we started to play together, and we won.
Act 2. Nothing about us without us. Performing in the role of Tiny Tim for 3 years, professionally voice acting and auditioning, without even considering it consciously, Eleanor was perfectly positioning herself for an opportunity.
We were doing a show called The Witches. It's based on a book by Roald Dahl. It's a big musical and it's child-based. It's a family show, and a lot of the people in it are children. I was describing it with Andrew Holland, who's my colleague and who actually taught me everything I know. We were going to do 3 performances of it, and one was going to be a school's performance. So it was thought that we could use a child's voice for the school's performance. I didn't want to do a school's performance without having the input of a blind child.
The importance of authentic casting can never be understated. When it comes to audio description, that not only applies to the voice of the narrator, it also means blind quality control or having a member of the target audience review the script.
We'd had a production at the Globe of a retelling of Cymbeline. It was in present-day dress, and the young people in the audience who were visually impaired were very keen to know what footwear the different characters were wearing. So back to the fact that a different sort of crinoline or farthingale gave a sense of status in Elizabethan times, it was evident that for these teenagers, the different trainers that were being worn gave a sense of status in the modern time. And that hadn't been mentioned because it wasn't a consideration of us as an access team or our describers. We weren't viewing the world through that sense of what was important in the costume to a young person.
That's David Bellwood.
My pronouns are he, him. I'm a 40-something-year-old cis white man, non-disabled. I think that's an important thing to point out. I am the head of access at the National Theatre, so I am accountable and responsible for the experience of deaf, disabled and neurodivergent people who have contact with the National Theatre on any level. So that might be as members of staff, it might be as scholars or students, it might be people who have popped into the foyer for a coffee or gone into our bookshop or want to hire costumes. There's quite a range of points of contact, but the fundamental piece is trying to make sure that we deliver something like equity for deaf, disabled and neurodivergent people in all the work that we do.
And I knew Eleanor, and I knew she was a theatre goer.
And she said, hey, I'm working on The Witches. It's a kids' play. Would you like to consult on the script? And I was like, oh yeah, that would be great to help other kids. You can sit there as an adult and go, oh, a child might not understand that word, but you'll never get as good as a child who sort of remembers not understanding those words or still doesn't. There were a few words in that script where I was like, what does that word mean? Even as a 12, 13-year-old. And the youngest children there were 8, so you can imagine there were a few words in there that I thought they wouldn't understand. But to begin with, it was just a consulting role, and I was just going to help edit the script and work out what would make sense and what wouldn't.
In 2020, Warner Brothers released the film adaptation of The Witches starring Anne Hathaway. Response from the disability community quickly followed due to the portrayal of the witches as having split hands or a limb difference having fewer than 5 fingers or toes. Fortunately, the National Theatre was taking a different approach.
We have the script of The Witches lent away from anything that could or would potentially resemble disability. The audio description needed to parallel that care and that attention to detail. We have a young person, which provides us with our prism of what's important. We have a young person who's an incredibly talented actor and deliverer of narration, and we have a young person who understands best practice in audio description. So it's sort of nudge from Ross going,
why don't we use Eleanor?
So we did. Eleanor and her father were both like, yes, we can do this. It's going to be great. It's scary, but it's exciting.
So then it was really a question of how are
do
we
we
going
do
to
it?
do this?
Hey, many of you have been asking how you can support the podcast. Here's 2 ways to do that. First, Read My Mind Radio merch. T-shirts, hoodies, coffee mugs, more. All with Read My Mind Radio inspired themes.
Check this out.
For those of us who are serious about our AD,
Say it with your chest.
an audio description icon with the letters AD is accompanied by the phrase Snob Squad in capital letters. Beneath the quotes is the text Quality First. If you want humans creating all aspects of your AD,
Say it with your chest.
in a black and white nutrition label, the text reads 100% organic. Text below that reads audio description is for humans. Underneath that, in all caps, get the AI out of here. No artificial intelligence added. On the bottom center is a QR code. Guess where the QR code leads you?
Enter.
Of course, there's the classic. Audio description is more than entertainment. And just to represent for the podcast, official Read My Mind Radio family, consider posting a picture in your shirt. And don't forget the image description. Get as creative as you like with it. Tag at Read My Mind Radio on FB or IG, and at TS Read on Twitter. If you want to buy me a coffee or cup of tea, you can do that too. To support, visit readmymind.com/support. And with all sincerity, your support is greatly appreciated. Now let's stop here and get back to the episode.
Oh, yeah.
Act 3. Break it down. Let's break the narration process down into small, manageable chunks. First, accessing the information or reading the script.
I didn't want to use one hand to read Braille because that would take ages. Some parts in that show are very fast, and I had to read the line quite quickly. So, it had to be super speedy. I used paper script of Braille just so that I could be more fluent and faster and no other sort of sounds from the audio description box. So we did a couple of practice runs before the actual show where just a couple of people from the National Theatre and my mummy sat in the audience and just listened to it, and they said there was one point where the line went over an actor speaking, maybe we need to cut that one down. So we cut the script down a lot, but there was still just over 400 lines for me to read during that whole show.
Practice makes perfect. Eleanor did the first half in one sitting, then the second, and eventually did the entire performance once or twice on her own before the big day.
Very stressful, very, very stressful, but at the same time, afterwards I was so happy that it all went well.
It's live theater. Stress comes with the job.
When you're doing live theatre, it's a very fluid piece of work because you might get a very enthusiastic audience one night and they'll be clapping for a long time, and then you might get one that only claps for a short time, and then the actors on stage come a bit quicker. We had 80 children and they were absolutely going wild. They were laughing, they were really having a great time. So sometimes the actors had to sort of do a bit of filler work before they could actually say their line because it just wouldn't be heard. And in that case, I had to give Eleanor some ad-libs to do so that people wouldn't feel that they were being left behind. And also they knew what the rest of the audience were laughing at the same time as they did.
You might think the way to handle these situations would be for Roz to serve as a secondary narrator, covering the spontaneous description.
No, I would just give her the words. We talked about it beforehand. And I said there will be these pinch points, and we knew where they were likely to be. And I said I may just come in. And if I come in, I'm going to give you just a couple of words, and I'd like you to deliver it in the way I give it to you. So if I said something like, his head drops off, she would do, his head drops off. So it was exactly the same kind of delivery.
Timing changes may not always require new description, but rather a prompt to read a particular line.
Each line of description was given a letter. So the first line was A, the second line was B. Because it's live theatre, somebody didn't do something, we just don't say that line. But I had to give her the next line and tell her to jump D, next one E. She had to react really quickly.
Imagine for a moment, you're enjoying a live performance at a theater with audio description. You're really into this performance when all of a sudden, after the narrator provides a bit of description and the actors continue with their dialogue, you hear... or worse. You just can't overstate the importance of assuring the narrator closes the microphone in between their narration. I'm just saying.
We worked out a way that I could read the script and go out to the audience, because in a normal audio description scenario, the audio describer would have a fader, which would mean they would need another hand to move the switches and press buttons and stuff. But obviously, I needed to read Braille. The amazing sound people at the National Theatre came up with a system where I used a foot pedal to cue my voice and go out to the audience.
This is the technical wizardry of the sound department. They could make sure that the audience didn't hear any click on, click off, which often happens with mics that are switched. The pedal was vital because Eleanor was receiving vocal cues from Roz. So if the fader was up at any point, the audience would have heard Roz give a vocal cue. So the technical accuracy of Eleanor's delivery relied on the two of them working in tandem to make sure that the audience never heard that vocal cue, but did hear the complete line of audio description. They absolutely nailed it, but it wasn't no easy task.
It was a great idea, and it really, really worked. There were a lot of people helping us work out how to do this.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see if others adopted the foot pedal approach. Because, that's what usually happens with Access, right? It becomes something that works for everyone.
Yeah, I think that's right. You've made a good point that I will action tomorrow of making sure that they're aware of it.
Act 4. The bigger picture. Audio description is more than entertainment, meaning there's a bigger picture. For example, Roz wasn't just concerned about the performance. She understood the importance in making sure that Eleanor wouldn't become discouraged by the process. That's real support.
She was so excited. She was so enthusiastic, and she was so enjoying the process. She was very concentrated.
The first half was the very upbeat, very fast half, and the second half it calmed down a little bit. So once I got through that first half, I was like, I'm okay now, I've got this.
She knows her abilities, and she knows how to communicate those abilities to people. She knew what she was doing. I mean, she wants to do it again, and I would have absolutely no hesitation in working with her again. She was all smiles most of the time.
Focusing on the bigger picture helps you recognize the blurred line between who's giving and receiving support.
It was a very much two-way process, because she was learning from me, but I was learning from her, and we were both new to this. Neither of us had done it before. I've worked with disabled describers, but I hadn't worked with anybody who was blind before as a describer. So we were feeling our way all the time, really. I think what she was teaching me was how she negotiated something for the first time and how she negotiated it herself. And what I was trying to do was to just listen and find out where her fears were.
Why is this important in general and to you?
I do believe that we've a long way to go before we have authentic voices, people who actually represent the piece that is out there. It's important for me to say this is something that is missing within the audio description field, in this country at least. It was important to get a child, because I think in The Witches, I would have been the witch. I'm the old woman who is talking into your ear. And we wanted to actually represent the fact that it was a child's story and it was told through a child's mind. So we really wanted to make sure that the description came through a child's mind. So even an adult, I think, listening in that would have had a different perspective. It means now we've worked through a lot of the issues. We've solved a lot of the problems. I'd like to be able to share it with people and let them know that this is possible. Absolutely anything is possible if you've got the will.
Of course, there's no one solution for every situation. We're talking about creating an environment for success. That's the blueprint.
Somebody's got to be first. Somebody's got to trust. Somebody who is running a theatre group has got to trust the fact that this is possible and it's going to give a good experience to the audience.
Again, the bigger picture.
With live theatre, we very rarely get audio-described performances. They are few and far between, which is a sad reality.
And while she's just getting started, bringing some of that access to the community, as far as we can tell, Eleanor is the first blind person to narrate a live theatrical performance in the UK.
It's a small community, and I think we would have heard whether somebody had done it live. To actually sit in a box and do that description and deliver it in the more traditional way, really, which is people with headsets sitting in an audience and you in a box somewhere overlooking the stage with your script in front of you and delivering at that moment. I haven't heard anybody who had done that, let alone a 12-year-old.
Have you yourself or anyone there at the theater sort of get any direct feedback?
I guess, which is really important in this sort of role, is not to expect gratitude. Access is a civil right. And if we ask of disabled people to be grateful for it, I feel that there's a power dynamic in there which is really quite unhealthy. It's important we don't go looking for praise. So the feedback came in over time. It was overwhelmingly positive, which is absolutely fantastic and just sort of proved to us the validity of it, but also meant that we could speak directly to Eleanor and say, look at what you succeeded, which is really, really important. And we're still talking about that feedback and the response from those young people.
What does that mean to you? The fact that there are other blind students who get to hear a blind narrator doing that, does that mean anything to you?
It means so much to me because I know that if that was me experiencing a visually impaired audio describer describing that show, it would be amazing. I just hope maybe I brought a nice first experience of the theatre to some of those children.
When you say it would have been amazing for you to experience in that, what would that have meant for you?
I'd find it quite relatable. Maybe there were some kids that would be like, oh gosh, I wouldn't be able to do that. But I like that kind of thing. So if I'd been in that situation, sitting there listening to it, I could think, hey, I could do that. Maybe I could do that one day. It's possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You proved it's more than possible. It is a thing. Do you have any blind or visually impaired mentors, whether you know them personally or not? Are there people that you can look to that you say, oh, okay, this is a path for me?
There aren't that many out there that sort of make themselves known. They're just kind of in the background, which is great, really, because it's amazing to be a visually impaired actress or actor, but at the same time, maybe you don't want all that fame.
There was a film we watched recently on Netflix.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember the
it
name
was
of
a
that?
series, All the Light We Cannot
Yeah.
See. That was amazing.
Was it
That was really good.
Loberti.
The miniseries, which debuted on Netflix in 2023, received wide recognition for authentic casting for the role of Marie-Laure LeBlanc, played by Aria Mia Liberti and Nell Sutton, both of whom are blind. And y'all know there's a strong Read My Mind radio family connection here, right? Our brother, Joe Strechay, was one of the producers for the Netflix project. In general, Joe's doing that work increasing disability representation in front and behind the screen. The audio description was produced by the folks from IDC with narration by Fern Lolum, a blind narrator. P.S. I believe she's in the UK. You should reach out to Eleanor. Maybe like you said, some of the younger folks will be able to see you and say, hey, yeah, this is possible.
Yeah, I really hope so. That's what was kind of powering me through. When I got to those harder parts of the show, I thought, I hope this is helping others.
There it is, the big picture. While I recognize the importance of connecting the dots to the bigger picture and have a lot more to say about that, I'll save that for another time. Let's celebrate Eleanor's success and all the love and support that was poured into this young lady. Imagine what we can do if that was the standard approach to access. Remember, access is for consumers and creators. Big big shout out to Roz Charmer, David Bellwood, Tim, and the youngest to do it, Eleanor Stollery. You are all official members of the Read My Mind Radio family. If you're interested in following Eleanor, her social media manager and security has the details.
Eleanor's Voice on Facebook, ER Stollery on Instagram and Twitter.
And you can chat more with Roz
At Alcibiades, I will spell that for you, ELSIEBIADES. But also it's ros.chalmers@gmail.com.
You know, it's a lot of work producing this podcast, but it means a lot to me, and I hope to you too. I appreciate you all and hope you continue rocking with Read My Mind Radio, available wherever you get your podcasts. Transcripts and more are over at readmymind.com. There's only one way to get there, no matter who you are, king or queen, duke or duchess. You have to spell it right. That's R to the E. I.
D, and that's me in the place to be.
Like my last name.